We've been hanging out for weeks. I mean, this might be the first time you've checked out one of my YouTube videos in years or ever. If so, welcome. But I've been back on YouTube for, I don't know, a few weeks, almost every week now. So it's been super fun. And mostly, I just ask people to send me questions because I like digging down rabbit holes. And some people enjoy watching me meander through all types of tangents. So send me your questions, leave them in the comments below, and I will definitely use them in the future. Let's dig in. All right, at Jostled44, will you ever fight professionally again? Now we're going to talk about a lot of other things later in this show that are more interesting to a lot of people, but I'll tell you some stories about being a low-level professional fighter, and then I'll answer that again. Although I'll give you the quick answer, almost certainly not. But I started fighting. My first fight was 10 days before my 39th birthday. So I was really old. And I tell you that because there are 29-year-olds watching right now who are like, oh man, like worried about their future or feel trapped. If you're 29 or 33, I don't know why I jostled between 34 and 33. There's no real difference. But if you feel trapped, you're never trapped. There are people in there. There's a guy actually on YouTube. I'm sorry I don't know his name, but he's like in his late 60s or early 70s, and he plays guitar and he does cover songs. If you Google cover song "Don't Look Back in Anger" Oasis, he might pop up. He did "Creep." That's another good one. That guy's like in his 60s or 70s, and his songs are great. And I don't know anything specifically about him. But he started his YouTube channel in the 60s, and I'm pretty sure he's making his living off it when you look at the numbers on there. And I like to invent stories of people's lives. It's fun to do out in the world, especially if you can tilt towards fun or positive vibe things. It's a fun experiment. But I like to imagine that this guy was like always playing music, and his family was like, he's so good at it. Like, you should do something. And the world just wasn't such that he could do that. Maybe he had a job, like maybe he had a lot of responsibilities and, tried playing on the weekend at a bar and it just didn't work out. And suddenly in his 60s, somebody's like, have you tried YouTube? And they put the thing on and he played his guitar and he's like, that's fun. And hundreds of videos later, he's got millions of views. You can do this anytime, right? So now I wouldn't recommend starting professional fighting at 39 years old or, in your late 30s, but at the same time, I can't tell you what to do. And nobody could tell me that was a bad idea, even though it was, in many ways, was a bad idea. Now, having said that, everything that I have in I don't know what the parallel universe where I didn't fight, didn't train full time for 2-3+ years, and then fight and have 8-9 pro fights. And this timeline where I did that, I have a wonderful life, and I'm very happy, and I'm very, very grateful. And so most of the things I have, like this YouTube channel and making my own digital business where I get to like talk about martial arts and my commentary jobs and all these things that I have that are related to that, and then all the good things that happen in my life because I have a good business, they all come directly from fighting, taking a big risk like in my late 30s. And I got beat up in my first fight and submitted early in my second until I started getting a little success and I won a couple fights and stuff. But it was a wonderful experience and I see the world differently and everything. My perspective is all through the lens of martial artistry and trying to learn about the world. You learn about the world through whatever the thing is that you study. And I get to study martial arts. Also, this is off topic, but that's what I do, right? But this timeline where I did that, I have a daughter. It's somewhere in the last few weeks or just a few months, I started thinking, think about, anyone who has children, think about this. And if you don't have children, you're someone's child, right? Like everyone is somebody's kid. If anything changed in the lives of your parents, one thing changed in the lives of your parents before your conception, you do not exist. It's the wildest thought. It's the wildest thought. If you ever have any regret in your life and you have a child, you can't have that regret because if you'd have changed anything. The human life is the result of two unlikely pieces of genetic material meeting inside the body of a mother at a particular moment in time. Now, if you change anything, and I mean it is 1 in trillions in that moment and different in a different moment, if the night, you wouldn't exist if your dad stopped 1 step on the stair and took a deep breath. If any moment in their lives that change, you don't exist, right? Regret doesn't make any sense if you have a child, or even your parents' regret makes no sense, because the child doesn't exist, you change anything. So I couldn't have changed anything and still have my daughter, who of course I adore, right? And couldn't love anything more. So, but back to the original question. Will I ever fight professionally again? I'll be 55 this year, right? It is highly unlikely. I cannot imagine a scenario in which I would do it. I cannot imagine a scenario in which my wife would tolerate the conversation, never mind the doing of it. The memory of what it's like to be in such shape that you can, at least the shape that I would demand of myself to be a professional fight, that memory is so amazing to me, that I was once so unbelievably fit that I could do things that, and never mind the fights, training, and I could roll 20, they do what they call a Shark Tank, where you sit in, and in the weeks before a fight, I could sit in that Shark Tank and do 18, 20, 25 rounds of jiu-jitsu with really good people. And, like every moment isn't great, and some moments they're better than me, but I could do them over and over and over and over again. I could run for, it's amazing to be in that type of shape, but that's far from where I am now. I used to, when I would walk in to commentate a show, almost 100% of the time, I would find myself defaulting to an idea that I didn't put in my head. A lot of thoughts just pop into our heads, right? We don't choose them, they just appear. The thought would appear, oh God, I wish I was fighting tonight. I had that for years, but I don't have that anymore. I don't have that anymore. Now I have, and for the last 3-4 years, when I sit down, the default thought that pops in my mind is, oh my God, I can't believe I ever did that. I'd be sitting next to a cage and be like, oh my God, I can hardly remember the reality. I remember being anxious and being afraid and being, overly psychologically aroused and all these things. But I can't remember the feeling. I just remember that it was so. But I look and I go, I can't believe I did that. And there's times I'm so proud that I demanded that of myself and got myself into that place. And like I said, everything I have in my life is directly a result of having done that, right down to my wife and my daughter and my home and my job and the way I view the world is all connected to them. So I'm delighted that I did it. But I'm old and I'm out of shape, and it would be absurd to fight ever again. I might do a jiu-jitsu tournament at some point in my life or something like that, but no, I ain't fighting people. It's crazy that I ever did that. At the MMA halls, I did a question from the MMA halls a few weeks back. Definitely follow them, they're really great. Also their name, I say it all the time, but you can't, there's never gonna be a better name than the MMA halls, ever. What are your thoughts on modern day media, influencers, and the evolution of how fighting sports is covered now? By the way, I caught your last YouTube upload and actually listened to the whole thing at the gym. It's very rare considering my short attention span. Good job. Thank you. Let's repeat the question. Thank you. What are your thoughts on modern day media, influencers, and the evolution of how combat sports is covered now? So, if you are kind enough and interested enough to watch my stuff, first of all, thank you. It's really cool that, how cool is it? You just get to make things and people watch it and like it. That's the greatest thing ever. If you like my stuff, you probably notice I actually don't really talk about combat sports much, because weirdly, and this is an amazing freedom for me, I don't really, I almost consume no UFC anymore. I watch some of the fights, and very rarely actually do I even watch them live anymore, because I have so many, so much work. It's not really work, but so much time that I invest in what I get to do myself. And then so many other shows to commentate that if 3 Saturday nights a month for 4 or 5 hours I was watching TV, I wouldn't see my wife and my daughter, right? Like, so it's just I can't fit it into my life anymore. Also, over time, I enjoyed less and less the consumption of the corporate presentation and the overproduction. It's just not my thing right now, right? Maybe again at some point they'll change, and they won't miss me. Like, they don't care, right? So it's certainly not a knock. It's just the truth. I also don't consume almost any coverage of combat sports. I end up at Karate Combat and Game Bred and some bare knuckle and LFL in the Netherlands. There's a few shows that I do that are quite busy, and I end up, consuming some of the coverage around it. There's a lot of coverage around Karate Combat lately. Karate Combat is growing quickly. So I end up seeing some of that, and the cool thing about it is it's not kind of just the same old. Karate Combat is very different than MMA, so it is, the way people talk about it is very different. That's super refreshing. But yeah, I don't really, it's an amazing thing. I can only talk about my own perspective and hope that it's useful, and then try to sometimes see what I can do that hopefully is of general interest to people. But my personal life, and I'm saying this so that hopefully maybe this will be useful to somebody, my experience in the world, my day-to-day life, improved dramatically over the last 5 years. I had a baby 2.5 years ago, so obviously that's a big part of how my life has changed for the better. But I stopped consuming first news, especially television news, but I call it bad news. Because there's like 1,000 things that happen in the world today that are remarkable, but we're gonna only talk about the popular war or the popular, science or pandemic, whatever it is, right? I don't care. Like, it's just, I stopped consuming that. And I stopped consuming bad news. Because news, what we call news, we should just call it bad news. Because there's also lots of other things happening all day, all the time. I stopped consuming that. And then when I stopped consuming this nonstop diet of sort of corporate combat sports, and all the cottage industries around it. These guys are mad at these guys, and what did this guy say about this? And when I say these are people I love and respect. Like, what does Michael Bisping say about this kind of thing over here? And, Joe Rogan said this, and God bless, and I never say God bless, because that's sort of not really my thing, but I just said it for some reason. But, cool if that's, talking about how a sport is presenting, who's next to do it, whatever. If that's your thing, by all means do it. But it is, many years ago now, it stopped being my thing. So I don't do it. So I don't know, for the most part, how combat sports is covered now, because I don't consume it. I just don't click on it. I just don't go to these sites, and I just don't listen to. I do consume a lot of things, but my preference has been philosophy, things about learning and growth and things like that. That's just where the last number of years have been. My life is way better. I do know that a lot of the way that large corporations, whether it is Coca-Cola or it is the WWE or the UFC, we'll use WWE because I don't want to pick on the UFC constantly. And even though that's the thing in my space that is the example for this, I don't want to seem like a hater. I don't have any ill will towards the big corporate anything. Although there are some negativity, there's a lot of negative things around big corporations, but that's a separate conversation for another day. But the key to cigarettes and Coca-Cola are very different levels of, maybe they're not, I don't know. Sugar's really bad for you, right? Sugar's really bad for you. But Coca-Cola or Burger King or the WWE, a big key to doing their business is controlling narrative, right? The WWE, I had friends that worked, I used to work at a place called The Score in Toronto, and my friend Mauro Ranallo, later Arda Okal, and a number of people worked there, and they were a partner with the WWE. And they had rules. This is not some secret. This, I think, is pretty well known. They had rules for certain terms when you were a partner. You weren't allowed to say wrestler. You had to say superstar. I just know a few of them off the top. There were dozens of them. You weren't allowed to say woman wrestler or female wrestler. You had to say diva. There were many others. But there were rules for how you could talk about them. And say the UFC, Coca-Cola, I'm sure it's a beverage, it's not a whatever. They have rules of the way that they want you to think about this thing. And it is not for your benefit, it is for corporate benefit, whether it makes you buy more things, or less uncomfortable with it, keep a congruent messaging, whatever the reasoning is. The UFC has these too, and when people deviate from them, they don't tend to like it, because part of a corporation is to control the narrative so the audience consumes it in a particular way and has a particular opinion about it. That's the key to it. So the history of the WWE and the UFC, for example, around presentation and journalists hasn't always been good. I do know that companies like this now buy pieces of some of the influencers. I know for the WWE and the UFC, for example, I'm sure this is true of the NBA and NFL. I won't name names because it's not my place, but they sometimes have people that are positioned publicly, and this is not illegal or anything, people that are positioned publicly as influencers are actually on their payroll as a full-time employee, and then the platform of the influencer belongs to them. Right? I'm not going to go out of my way I'm not a controversy guy. I don't need to say this about any of the specific things that are out there but some of this is quite well known. But again, this isn't wrong. There are companies that literally say to me, we'd like to give you some money and access to our catalog. Would you like to make some breakdowns? To which and we're all different, my answer is, as long as you don't tell me what to do. As long as I can make things that my audience will like, then of course. If all I'm doing is I'm going to make 30 breakdowns this month, and you're like, we have a couple of shows coming up, would you do some on our stuff? To which I say, sure, but you don't get to tell me which ones, and I'm not going to bring my audience and say, striker versus grappler establishment, winner gets a title shot, make sure you tune in. I'm not going to do that to my audience, man. I'm not going to do that. But with influencers or creators or whatever has become a very real part of every business. It is normal. It's normal. It is how these businesses now operate. There are, and some of them you notice if you watch my social. I'm just going to talk about myself. I'm not going to point fingers at anyone who does it. This is a very normal process. If you look at some of my socials, you'll see Betway. Betway as a gaming site that is a partner. Betway said, we'd like to partner with you. And I said, well, and they said, what would you like to do? And I said, well, what I wouldn't like to do is hold my phone up or put it in my car and sit there and go, all right, guys, use the promo code BINK, and on Saturday night at UFC 158, these are my picks. I got this guy by this and this guy by this. Lock it in right now. I'm not going to do that to my audience. The audience is they're your friends now. These are my friends. These are the people I share stuff with. I'm not going to do that. Now, what I will do is I'll make something that I think they'd like, and I'll tack your logo on it, or I'll say, Betway supports this series, so please give them a follow if you like. I'll do that because that way I'll be able to make 26 other things for free that I'll enjoy making and hopefully my audience will like, just because I do this one for you, and I'll do it in a way that my audience will enjoy because I chose it. I'll do that. We're all different. There are absolutely people who will sell creatine or whatever, and that's there. Everyone should run their business the way they want to. But this is a very normal part now. But yes, back to your original question at the MMA halls. Love you guys. modern day media influencers and the evolution of combat sports coverage. I don't know what the mainstream coverage is because I don't consume it, but in the world of, digital, I do business in that world, and I know it's a very normal thing now. I choose to not be not for sale, to hype things unless I want to hype them, and unless my audience might like it. But everyone's different, and it's a really cool time, and it's a time that if you're an expert in macaroni or like old episodes of Friends, you get to go and do it your way. And if you want to sell, other products and do promo codes and whatever, by all means do it. I'm no judgment. All right, what do we got here? At Nick Zach, what do you do for fun when you aren't entrenched in the world of martial arts? Maybe a better question is, what does a typical weekday look like for Robin Black? So the great thing about creating your own, business or whatever you want to call it, being an independent person in the new paradigm that we get to work in, is hopefully you can make your typical day like however you want it, which is so cool. For me personally, the biggest thing that I've kind of recently learned, and I mean recent, like the last year, is you actually I've prioritized figuring out how to do better work in smaller windows. Having a baby sort of created that change. And a lot of these changes are not super, instant. Like you don't suddenly go, okay, I'm gonna completely change how I do my typical day. They're usually slow and gradual. One of the themes that whenever we hang out and chat about is sort of fluidity and change, be water, all these kinds of things. The only constant being change. Suddenly you have a baby. It isn't just like, I'd like to spend more, I need to spend more time with her. You're like, oh, I want to spend this. Of course you think intuitively if you have a child that you'd like to hang out with them, but you don't know how much you'd like to. Okay, so now, in the morning, I do get up and I do want to write right away. And I find this will make me a better dad and husband and neighbor and everything, person, and I encourage a lot of people to do this. 10 minutes, 3 minutes, whatever, just write immediately. If you can do it before you look at this thing, it's even better, right? Like most of us, and I do it more often than I would like to, but I'm conscious of it. Most of us wake up and we pick this thing up. As soon as we do this, we're in reaction mode. Okay, wait a second, that email from work. Oh, wait, I got that thing. Oh, what's the notification? You're in reaction mode. If you don't do that, you drink a glass of water and you walk over and you sit down, you're sort of in creation mode. Something's in there that happened in the night you don't even know about. It just feels good. If you don't know what to write, immediately write down things you're grateful for or things you're excited about for the day. It's just a very simple process. Then the next few hours for me, now there is no typical day because I'll be traveling to Nashville for karate combat, then I'll be home for a few days, then I'll be traveling for bare knuckle, and then, so there's a lot of travel and there's a lot of moving parts, but when I am home, I'm gonna spend the first couple hours of the morning with my daughter. She'll go to like a play school a lot of mornings, then I'll do the best work, the most important work of the day in that 4-hour window. Pick her up, hang out with her, and then she takes a nap, and then I'll do some other work in that window, and then we'll go out and do fun stuff. And I used to be a 12-hour day guy, and I'm doing way better work now. Way better work and way more work. Because what I realized is, and a lot of us are like that. We're gonna hustle, let's put in the whole day. How much scrolling are you doing in that time? Right? Like how much are you actually doing? How much just refreshing your email are you doing? A lot more than you think. And in the end, whatever your day is, and I'm trying my best to do this with my days, we're all getting better at it. Wherever you are, you're gonna get better at it. Wherever I am now might be better than I was before, but I'll drop down later. But all you wanna do, all you're looking for out of life, and I mean like one of the primary things in life, is to be intentional with your time. Just think about it. What if you can just do whatever you want all the time? And it depends what you want. Because if all you want to do is smoke weed in your underwear and watch Netflix, you can do that, but you will not probably be able to do that all the time. Like, because, now your house is going to be messy or there's no food in the fridge. Like the most basic, depends what you want to do, but to be intentional, like to really intentionally use as much of your day as possible. But to add another part to this question is one of my sort of weaknesses right now that I'm trying to get better at is actually outside of martial arts, my business and my business, which is martial arts and art. Like I think of all this, hanging out and talking or making art pieces or whatever. Outside of that, and my wife and my daughter, actually one of my big weaknesses is I don't have a lot of other hobbies. I'm trying to schedule reading hours every day now, because reading for me is really important. It makes my brain, stimulates my brain into other things. I read about things sort of adjacent to martial arts, other types of art, other things about art, about learning and growth and philosophy and related things. I'm in the market for an unrelated hobby and haven't yet found it. But I've also really started to do Tai Chi lately, and I found that to be just a form of meditation that I really like, and I recommend that highly. Okay, at Majid MMA, in a world of martial arts, do you listen to your heart or to what people tell you? So I actually picked this question when I saw it on my, I can't call it X. Do you guys call it X? You do? You don't? No, Twitter, yeah, I call it Twitter. I might always call it Twitter. But yeah, Majid MMA, in a world of martial arts, do you listen to your heart or what people tell you? I picked it because I really like this question. And I think if we go in the world, do you listen to your heart or what people tell you? Because this actually, it's a very broad question, which I like, because I could tangent out on it forever, but I'm going to try to be concise if I can. Probably can't, but I'll try. You could put in anything. In the world of learning, do you listen to your heart or what people tell you? In the world of cars, do you listen to your heart or what people tell you? In the world of podcasting, in the world of coffee, like anything. This is a really good question. It's like, I like these big questions that come down to like, who am I and what do I do and why do I do it? And what should I do? Because I think if you are working, studying anything, chemistry, medicine, computers, whatever, if you're studying anything for a long time, you have a deep curiosity and commitment to studying something for a long time, they always lead you to big questions. Because, is this a punch? Is this a hook? Is this a kick? Yeah, right? But what is that word? What does it actually mean? And is the Chinese word for punch a literal translation of the English word for punch? Or is it just sounds made by a human to reflect that movement? And I know that sounds esoteric, but really think about it. Think about the words you're using. Like, what are you thinking? How you think in words? Where'd you get those words? How many words do you have available to you? Like, all of these things are really valid questions. They sound weird, but if we're lucky enough to get to a point that we have some time to think, and it's not easy today, what kind of questions are you gonna ask yourself? Like, hey, what people tell me, should I listen to it? It's a pretty big question, because you got to ask, who are these people? And I think that maybe is a place to start with this question. Do you listen to your heart or what people tell you? First of all, you should be if you can, you should be very selective of who you listen to. Often we are choosing, because of how busy we are choosing voices to consume, right? So it's very popular podcasters, people who make long-form content and short-form books. A lot of these are who we listen to and who we're hearing. Now, should you listen to your parents? Well, as you get older, you might know certain things more about the world than they do, but they've been around an extra generation, right? Do you have mentors? I have a few really key mentors. There's a woman named Jennifer Goldstein, she's a lawyer. She's Ioana Jędrzejczyk and Valentina Shevchenko's manager, also a lawyer, and has done a lot of fascinating things in sports and media and all these different things. She's very much been a mentor to me. And when I think about the first time I met her in 2019, so 5 years now, how I saw the world different and how I see it different today, a lot of it I learned from her, or she triggered other types of learning. Joe Rogan's a mentor, and there were times years back where I spoke to him quite a lot. Now he's a mentor a bit at a distance, and not in everything. No one should be a mentor in everything. Other books that I read, I consciously read them because I see that some of these people really have it. Ryan Holiday is a great writer. I mention Robert Greene a lot because Mastery in particular is one of my favorite books of his. That's where I would start. So who are you listening to? Do not listen to anyone who hasn't done what you're hoping to do, or doesn't believe what you're hoping. Believe is a tough one because you should always be open to new beliefs. Whatever we believe because we've been exposed to certain things that seem true at the time. We're missing thousands of other pieces of information, millions of other pieces of information that, if we're open to them, could change what we believe. So it's important to be open to it. It's a really complicated question. Following your heart, too, is a really, listen to your heart or what people tell you. That's a really tough thing, too. It's like, how much have you learned? And when do you know if you can trust what you've learned? These are complex things, right? In the world of martial arts, do you listen to your heart or to what people tell you? What I will say, I'm gonna meander away from this one because it's so complicated, which I love and appreciate. If I had another hour, and I'm gonna bring it back. I'm gonna bring this question back another day. But I will tell you this, and I'll tell you based on what I've learned from some of the great nuggets that Bruce Lee uncovered from studying other people for many years. And that is that what you don't want to do is just get dragged into the dogma and doctrines. This is so and it'll always be so, and you have to believe this and never do this and always do this. Those are all traps, right? You gotta, we're gonna learn forever, right? We're gonna learn forever. And I try to keep in mind, and I've heard this from a lot of people who've given me this advice, and they try to implement it in their own lives, is like, whatever you know today, imagine what if you could live for 20 or 50 or 100 more years and keep learning with an open mind. What would you think of what you know today? And the truth is, you would think it was incredibly rudimentary. Whatever you know today, if given an open mind and the chance to learn for 30 years, you would look at your thought today, as rudimentary and basic and incorrect perhaps, or unevolved or whatever. So it's not important. Your belief system today is temporary if you're open to change. What you believe right now shouldn't be the structure by which you live your whole life, because what you believe today, some of it was just given to you when you were a kid, and you just believe it. Or you got it from the internet, or you heard it, you listened to, the news or sports or whatever. And I mean, there are people that literally will argue, they would argue with John Jones right here, or Khabib about what's the best so-and-so for fighting, because they heard it said 50 times, so they're sure that they're right. It was just TV. It's just, so where you get your information matters, but it's also like it's all wrong. If we happen to still be a human race in 3,800 years, we will look back at today the same way we look back at phrenology, which was the study of the shape of the head, or astrology, which people once believed was the universe. Today, astronomy will once be viewed as astrology. It will, So it's all kind of nonsense. That doesn't mean don't believe in anything. In fact, it means the opposite. It means just keep searching and keep gathering information. I'm coming back to this question, though. Definitely. I'm going to save it. All right, I got 2 questions here. I'm going to read them both. Chase, use them however you want. 2 questions. At Gleno70, why is it we drive on a parkway but park on a driveway? At the Kev Johnson, how can you fall down 7 times and get up 8? The math ain't mathin'. I'm going to address both of those separately and then package them together. Why is it we drive on a parkway but park on a driveway? This actually is I think, very profound question, because it's actually a question about what is language. Now, you might disagree. You might be like, no, it's just a question about parks and driveways and parkways. But it's a question like, what is language, right? And what is language is a really important question, because language, in most cases, is our actual limitation, right? I was on a call, I forget even what it's called now, but it was like a media thing where like people would jump on and have like group chats. They do it on Twitter too, but it was something popular a year or two ago. And I was on a big martial arts chat room, audio chat room with somebody once, and somebody else was on there. I won't say his name, but he's a martial artist and he's in the business of martial arts. And he and I were both talking, and somebody asked, about martial arts in combat, and he said, well, I think when you use kicks at a distance and then you use punches in here and, the grappling, blah, 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 and did what we all do, right? And they said, Robin, do you agree? And I said, well, I mean, yeah, but it's also, these are words, right? The limitation, the biggest flaw we have from being able to explain what martial arts actually is, or what coffee is, or how the internet works, is the limitations of our language. We can only jigsaw together the words that we have to do the best version we can to explain a thing. The limitation is in the words, right? An orange, I don't know why I came up with orange, but an orange has a peel, it's of the color orange, you open it up inside, there are segments. That's the best we can fucking do. Now you can go down into what the chemical makeup is, but it's all just using whatever words we have. This is a magical thing, we call it a fruit, but it gives life and sustenance. I'm still just using words, right? What is that thing? Well, what if we could, our ability to speak could evolve for thousands of years and we could actually have more complex ways of expressing ourselves. We'd be able to say a hell of a lot more about that thing, right? Language is the limitation. And there's a really phenomenal book, and it's called The Four Agreements. And the Four Agreements is this Toltec philosophy. The Toltecs were a South American, community of artists that lived in a pretty successful environment, so they were able to look at the world sort of through the eye, without a lot of the pressures of the world around. I'm going to just tell you what the Four Agreements were, and then I'll get into it. The Four Agreements. The Four Agreements, what are the Four Agreements? Be impeccable with your word. So I'll tell you the book is called The Four Agreements, and here are the Four Agreements written in the book. Be impeccable with your word. Don't take anything personally. Don't make assumptions. Always do your best. Okay? Starts with be impeccable with your word. And a phenomenal book. I'm telling you, it'll change the way you look at things. It looks at it, it starts and says, what is a symbol? Well, we're trying to figure out how to express ourselves, and we're, humans in the early stage, we create a symbol that represents danger or food or whatever. Later on, these symbols become sounds, which become words. It's just sort of the best we can. When you dream, you don't dream necessarily in words. But if I ask you right now, think of a concept, any concept, that you can come up with or imagine or picture in your mind, but don't use words. It's very difficult, right? Babies don't use words. They haven't learned them yet, But once we start using words, we create these sort of little cells in which we can explain things. That's green and that's purple, and this is a microphone, this is a telephone, we start trying our best to label things. And then we use, and in this book it goes into say, we use simple words that actually become really powerful, like ugly or beautiful and go out into the forest and find me an ugly tree or a beautiful tree. There's no such thing. No such thing exists. We invented the word and now we think that's a thing, or we apply meaning to it, but it's not there. So be impeccable with your word. It's like these words have like a lot of consequences and they're not actually real. They're just things we invented as a tool to try to make sense of the world around us, and we're pretty limited in our evolution, so we're stuck with these things, but be very careful with them. And one example I remember from the book is if my daughter was singing and I had a headache and I was tired and through whatever reason I just said, "Stop your singing, I hate that," she might never sing again. It would change her life forever, right? Be impeccable with your word. Always think about what you're saying as best you can. Because what you say will affect the world around you, and it's very imperfect. Words are so imperfect. Why is it a parkway? Why do we drive at a parkway but park on a driveway? It's just a great example of this, but it's everywhere. You know, this is not the color black. It is whatever it is, and that's the sound, the combination of sounds we agreed together that we'll know what that means. The second one is don't take anything personally. If somebody else doesn't, if we don't know what we're saying and our words are imperfect, then whatever somebody says actually has nothing to do with you. It's their best expression of how they feel in that moment, expressed through the rudimentary language that humans have. You can't take anything personally because it's got nothing to do with you. If we walk into, and this is another example from the book. I remember this book vividly. I've read it a few times, not for years, but I remember it vividly because it's a very moving book. You go into a movie theater and you watch a movie, and there's you, and there's your wife, and there's your mother, and they look the way they look. And then you go into the next theater, and you see your wife is watching the movie, and you watch her movie, she looks different, you look different, and her mother looks different. It all looks different. And you're like, wait a second, I'm not that tall. Wait a second, she thinks more highly of you than you think of yourself. She views her mother, and you go into the next movie theater, her mother's watching. You're like, wait a second, I'm a baby. Like every single theater is somebody's view of the world, and it has nothing to do with yours. I see the world around me, but if you sit right here, you see a completely different world. Then you see a different world. You do your best with these limited words to explain it. Don't take anything personally because nobody's view of the world, it's a reflection of how they feel. It's really helpful in a world where, you know, the internet's mad at you some of the time or you're mad at it. Don't take anything personally. If somebody says something about you, it's got nothing to do with you. It's a reflection of their feeling. Don't make assumptions. Assumptions is a story you invented in your head. And so you start behaving like it's true, you screw the whole thing up. And last, always do your best. It's a fantastic book. How did we get here again? Oh yeah, drive on a parkway, but park on a driveway. The four agreements, a book about language, among other things, that leads to a way to view the world. Always do your best. Not the best, but the best you can now. You can't always do your best, but you can if you view it appropriately. Your best now, your best tired, your best under the circumstances, your best when you can't see, your best when, just do your best. And do your best under all of the circumstances, right now, wherever you are, do your best. And I remember once actually talking to Rich Clementi, who is a great martial artist, and he was a really high-level UFC fighter. And he was saying, look, when you fight, as long as you did your best, you're going to be okay. And I remember thinking, did I do my best? And I realized whatever you did was your best. It was the best you could do. If you could have done better, you'd do better. And it's not only is it good to always do your best, but it's good to realize most people are always doing their best. When you're looking at your friend, you're like, why won't this guy get off the couch and get a job? This is the best he can do. I know it sounds crazy. You're like, no, he could do better. Not under the circumstances. Whatever he's going through, maybe he's scared or anxious or depressed or afraid. He's doing his best. And anyways, it's a phenomenal book. Please check it out. The Four Agreements. Chase has read it, actually. I remember I was like, wow, I remember this vividly. We actually talked about this more than once on a podcast I used to do, and around, Chase was the producer actually, in around 2016. We talked about this book, and I'm glad it came up again because I highly recommend it. And it's got to do, among other things, with language. So why do we drive on a parkway but park on a driveway? Be impeccable with your word. I don't know. At the Kev Johnson, how can you fall down 7 times and get up 8? The math ain't mathin'. We're going to end on this one today. Jay's going to have fun editing how we're going to combine these two, but they go together. We always end on something positive, and that's where I want to try to end this. How can you fall down 7 times and get up 8? Well, of course you cannot, right? Like, of course you can't. It's flawed language, it's flawed math, but that's not the point. And I know that at Kev Johnson is just playing, and it's great. I appreciate it. The point isn't that the math is wrong. If anything, maybe it is actually, come to think of it, it is possible that the person, whoever came up with this saying, actually, who came up with that? Who came up with fall down 7 times, get up 8? This is going to be nonsense. The power, Japanese proverb. So the quick answer is I don't know who came up with that, but it is apparently an old Japanese proverb, Zen proverb, fall down 7 times, get up 8. It is possible that in the writing of it, the imperfection is part of what makes it memorable, right? When you write or create or whatever, it's the flaws that make things cool, you know? The little human qualities, the little mistakes is what makes things cool. So it's possible that this is being provocative to make you think about it. It's also possible, as a Zen proverb, that maybe that's the point, is actually you can get up more times even than you fall down, right? And sometimes being asked to look at things in these weird, fascinating kinds of ways is what makes them memorable. But the point of this is, and this is how we're going to leave it, and we're going to leave it, because we're always trying to leave it positive. We're always trying to hang positive, but that won't always be perfect. We're not always, any of us are not going to be positive 100% of the time. There's no perfection, right? But the point of it is winning or success or whatever you're looking for is a series of failures and improvements and failures and improvements. And in fact, probably there's no ultimate end win and there's no true success, but the failing and improving is such a beautiful process in life. And once you start to embrace it, your life gets better constantly. You constantly challenge yourself. You don't fear being wrong or failing, and you don't hold on to like doctrines and dogma and belief systems and fight back at all costs when people feel the opposite. You actually are open to it, and you constantly change and learn and grow, try and fail and try again. And that's life. It's a process. And the process is, failure isn't trying and failing and getting up and trying and failing and getting up. Failure is not trying. You have to try. You have to try. You have to embrace that it'll fail. I remember, again, I'm alone on these podcasts or Hangouts or YouTubes or whatever we call this. So I have to draw on my personal experiences, and we're going to get guests, and that'll be part of it. We'll do it remote and in person. But in my own process, at different times in my life, people have been like, somebody said this to me maybe 6-8 years ago. You were a failed musician and you were a failed fighter and it's like, what are you talking about? I had brilliant experiences, and I traveled all over the world, and I learned things that I applied to now, and then fighting led me to this. It's like, this is life. You have to be a failed entrepreneur. If you are successful in your first business, that's the biggest curse you're ever going to get. You have to be a failed entrepreneur. You have to be a failed artist. You have to be a failed athlete. You have to have failures in when you break up with your first girlfriend, that is devastating, but it's part of it. Now you're going to find out how to be selective in different ways, to be a better boyfriend or girlfriend, how to improve yourself, or how to learn about yourself. You have to fail. You have to. So you fail 7 times, you get up 8. Makes sense to me. We'll call that, and we'll get doing another live soon, and let's do some more of these. Thank you to Toronto Podcasts. Check them out. And we'll be back in my studio in a couple of weeks. Lots of love. Blackout.